My name is Ranger Jeff, and I'm here today to talk to you about trees, or the study of trees, which is dendrology. Now, trees are really cool being that they have so many different characteristics. You can see a golden retriever dog or a Dalmatian and you know that they're different because of the way that they look. They have different characteristics. Well, trees are the same way. They have different characteristics. Some of the bark is flaky, some of the bark is very thin and smooth. Some of the leaves are long and have serrated edges, and some of them do not. So trees have different characteristics, and those different characteristics help them live or thrive where they are. Some trees out on the pond grow great out on the pond, but those same trees will grow up on a hill behind us. But that doesn't mean they can outcompete the trees that are up on the hill behind us. And just like the ones on the hill behind us can't compete out there in the pond. And so each tree species has its own different characteristics that help it thrive where it can thrive the best, where it can outcompete the rest of the trees. Oh, here's a great example. So this species is a sourwood, and sourwood trees have long, smooth leaves, and they have this rough bark. But the neat thing about sourwoods is that they hardly ever grow straight. When they're young, they'll grow up and then they start curving over. So this is a natural curve of the tree. It's supposed to be like that. Most trees that are in the woods grow tall and straight and try to get to the sunlight and outcompete that way. Sourwoods compete in a different way. They get whatever sun's left over in the mid-story, and so they have a curved shape to them when they get bigger. American beech has very smooth bark, and when you look at trees in the woods, you don't even need the bark to tell what, or the leaves to tell what tree species it is. You can just look at the bark. And beeches have very smooth bark, but the leaves are almost like paper. When you rub them, they almost feel like paper. Beech leaves have a serrated leaf to them, and the neat thing about beeches, in the wintertime, when other trees lose their leaves, beeches will hang on to theirs. They'll be brown, and the new leaves will push off the old ones. So in the wintertime, when you're looking around the woods and you see brown leaves hanging on and smooth bark, there's a really good chance that that's a beech tree. And then there are trees such as this one, which is a white oak. And white oak have bark that's kind of have a white tinge to it. And then if you look way up at the top, you'll see that the bark is kind of flaky. And that's just a characteristic, a great way to identify a white oak tree species. And you use oak in a lot of different things, cabinets. Oak is a very prized wood, but you also use it in making barrels. People used to make barrels to hold whiskey or wine, and they will make that out of white oak. And the reason they made it out of white oak is because it will hold water. If you try to make a barrel out of a red oak, it will leak out. All trees have tubes that go up and down them that carry water back and forth in the cambium layer and the bark layer. However, red oaks do not have something called a tyloses, and those tyloses are little almost stoppers that keep the water from going up or down. Red oaks don't have that. So if you make a barrel to contain a liquid out of a red oak, it'll just leak through the wood and leak out. They don't have the tyloses. So yellow poplar is a really cool tree. It grows up really tall and really fast. Yellow poplars, they almost always grow straight. And this is a young yellow poplar. And as you can see, the bark is almost smooth, similar to the beech tree. It has a little bit of mottling, but if you look real close, you start seeing these little crisscross lines in it. And as you get bigger, and you start seeing those same lines crisscrossing back and forth, and they're getting even more pronounced. As the tree gets bigger, you still got this long, tall, straight tree, but the bark is getting more pronounced. And as we move up just a little bit further, you'll see even bigger yellow poplar. This yellow poplar, the bark doesn't look as much like that first little one, but you can see those crisscross lines have gotten even more defined. It's even more pronounced. So just because it's the same tree species, there's different characteristics due to its age. Just like leaves, leaves on a little tree tend to be a lot bigger than leaves on a big tree. There's more leaves on a big tree and they're smaller, taking up more sunlight. But those little trees, they need bigger leaves to try to get as much sunlight as they can. They're competing. Trees are competing. They're competing for three things: water, soil, and sunlight. And the thing that they really lack the most is sunlight. And that's why trees grow so tall. They're trying to get up there and outcompete everything else. So this is called a devil's walking stick. And as you can see, the little prickles and the thorns coming off of it, it's not something that you want to grab as you're falling down. I've done it several times where I lost my balance and I grabbed hold to a devil's walking stick and it hurts your hand quite a bit. But the devil's walking stick, that's where it gets its name from. It seems like a mean stick to have or a mean tree to have, but actually the berries on it are really great for wildlife. Again, sometimes people look at this in one way and wildlife looks at it in another. Those berries are great for bears, they're great for birds. And the neat thing about a devil's walking stick is not just the thorns, but it has one of the biggest leaves of any tree that we have here at Merchants Millpond State Park. Some of these leaves can get to be over 4 foot long. So right in there is a leaf bud, and that leaf bud indicates to us that this whole thing is a leaf. And this is one leaf from a devil's walking stick or devil's walking cane. All these little ones coming off, those are called leaflets. And so you got a compound leaf here. One very long compound leaf with almost 100 different leaflets on it. So devil's walking sticks, although they have the thorns up here, they also have huge leaves. This one is almost 3 foot long and almost 2 foot wide. So that's a pretty big leaf. And what we have here is an American holly. Holly trees keep their leaves year-round, where a lot of our other tree species do not. They'll lose their leaves in the wintertime. They'll change colors and die and fall off the tree, and then they'll get new ones in the spring. But this is an evergreen, and the holly tree will keep its leaves throughout the winter. It'll still be green when everything else is brown and gray around here. And so when you're looking through the woods in the wintertime, and you see this patch of green, there's a really good chance that that's a holly tree, an American holly. American hollies are great for wildlife as well. They have little berries, little red berries that really pronounce and stick out. This tree, I'm not seeing any red berries on it, but that's okay. Not all holly trees have red berries. Some of them do, and some of them don't. So this is a wax myrtle, and as you see, it doesn't really look like a tree, but that's because this is a shrub. It's a smaller version of a tree. But one of the neat things about wax myrtle is people used to use it to make soap with. If you take the leaves off of a wax myrtle and you crush them up and rub them in your hand and smell them, it has a very pleasant aroma to it. But not all things have pleasant aromas. Some things smell like an old caterpillar. And for those that never smelled an old caterpillar, it doesn't smell very good. But black cherry trees, if you break the limbs off of that, it has a distinct, almost a sour smell to it. Others, like this wax myrtle, has a very sweet smell to it. So you can't just look at a tree, but you have to use your other senses as well. The different characteristics really shine the more you learn about things. So what we have is Spanish moss. And Spanish moss looks like this gray, dried up, almost dead-like thing. But this is actually a living plant. This is a living plant. All of that up there is living. It's not dead. Now you're thinking of plants being living, they should be green. Well, this is kind of neat. Watch this. We're going to take the Spanish moss and we're going to get it in the water. And when we bring it up, it turns green. And that's one of the neat things about Spanish moss. It's a living plant growing off of the tree. And it blows in the wind sometimes and it looks like an old man's beard out there on the pond, but these are living plants. So this is an adult, a mature yellow poplar. As we saw the first little one, little bitty thing, it had a very smooth bark and you could just barely see the crisscross lines on it. Well, this one is mature, much deeper, almost corky bark. And so this is a mature. So the little trees don't always look like the great big ones. The little ones don't look like their adult counterparts. And this just isn't with trees, it's with animals too. A lot of snakes that are juvenile don't look like their adult counterparts. So nature is really interested. There's so much to learn. It really is neat to go out and say, hey, what's neat about this? Because everywhere you look, there's something neat.